Late last night, the Alabama Senate approved a bill that would create the nation's strictest abortion law. The bill would make it a felony, punishable with up to 99 years in prison for a doctor to perform or attempt the procedure during any stage of pregnancy, except to save the mother's life. The overnight vote followed hours of emotional debate between lawmakers as the Republican-controlled legislature unilaterally removed exemptions for rape and incest. It passed overwhelmingly, 25-6. The move is part of a larger push across chunks of the Deep South and Midwest to challenge the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling by whittling down existing protections to its most restrictive. Opponents of the bill protested in the state capitol. The bill now heads to Republican Governor Kay Ivey, who has not yet indicated whether or not she will sign it. Joe.
So this is a complicated issue, Mika, looking at it politically.
Right.
You want to look at it politically. There are a series of polls that have been coming out recently. There was a Marist poll out that showed a swing towards Americans who identified themselves as being pro-life. But there's always a caveat to abortion polls, and it is this, and I think best exemplified by a Fox News poll that came out earlier this year. When you asked respondents, were you pro-life or pro-choice, that was split down the middle, and it has off and on over the past decade been split for the most part down the middle, usually more pro-choice than pro-life, but certainly voters have been moving towards pro-life for reasons that I've stated before, having to do with technology, 3D imagery, a lot of different things. In fact, I must say in this Marist poll, it's interesting that some of the biggest movement towards pro-life voters came from Democrats under 40. Younger Democrats who, again, as I've been saying all along, who are having children, who go and see the 3D imagery, understand that the viability of the medicine and the technology, medical improvements have vastly changed over the past 50 years or so, since 1973, and the viability of a newborn baby has certainly moved, and it's early and earlier. That said, Katty K, even if people identify themselves as being pro-life, here comes the caveat, and it's a big caveat. When you ask those same people, do you want Roe v. Wade to be overturned, those numbers plummet. In the latest Fox News poll, only 21% of Americans wanted Roe v. Wade overturned. That is 1 in 5 Americans, which, again, not making everything about politics, but this is the car that Donald Trump does not want to catch up with politically. This would be a nightmare scenario for Republicans going into 2020 if Roe v. Wade were overturned, because, I mean, 4 out of 5 Americans obviously would be against that move, and it would energize Democrats in the way that very few things have in a very long time.
Yeah, and you've got those competing impulses, right? The politics of this, which actually, when it comes to overturning Roe v. Wade, have not shifted very much in America. Even though younger Democrats, as you pointed out, do seem to be moving towards, some of them, a more pro-life position. And yet you've got these conservative lawmakers in places like Georgia and now in Alabama who are clearly Supreme Court shopping and want this case. They've even said it explicitly. They want this case to go the whole way to the Supreme Court. They've drafted the bill in such a way that they think it has the best possible chance of getting to the Supreme Court, because they see this as their best opportunity in decades. With a very conservative, a more conservative Supreme Court, they see this as their best chance to get a favorable hearing up here in Washington. And Donald Trump's going to have to wrestle those two potentially political forces when and if this Alabama bill actually does make it to the Supreme Court.
Let's bring in now MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, so we've seen these heartbeat laws in Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Ohio, where you cannot have an abortion after 6 weeks when there's a fetal heartbeat. This law, well, it's not a law yet, but the Republican governor expected to sign it, bans abortion all the way across, except in the rare case where it affects the mother's health, life and death of the mother here. I think Caddy's right in that this is about Brett Kavanaugh. This is about the Supreme Court justice. You've heard it from activists inside the state of Alabama, one saying, quote, why not go all the way? This was not possible until this moment. We feel like we've got a chance, if this makes it to the Supreme Court, to overturn Roe v. Wade.
There's a very good chance, if this makes it to the Supreme Court, that Roe v. Wade will be overturned, because we have known since the 70s that Roe v. Wade stands on a weak foundational basis. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, Roe v. Wade is really about, do we have an individual fundamental, do women have a privacy right in the Constitution that overrides state legislatures' abilities to make laws affecting abortion? And it's interesting to note that year 1900, almost every state prohibited abortion. By the time Roe v. Wade was decided, it was down to 30 states. The trend was that prohibiting abortion was going away. But now, by giving it to the Supreme Court, it creates a precedent that can be overturned. And the bottom line is that even if you are pro-choice, the right to privacy does not exist either in the history or the text of the Constitution, which is why Roe has always been ripe to be overturned.
Yeah, you know, Danny, it's interesting you say that, because Meek and I were talking about this this morning after the news broke overnight, and I'd said that my constitutional law professor, who very progressive, said, though I agree with the conclusion of Roe, it's a terribly written case, and its logic is baffling at times. But all that being said, we have a Chief Justice who I suspect is not going to want to uproot 50 years of precedent overnight any more than he wanted to hand Republicans a victory, a political victory on Obamacare. And here, Fox News poll saying 57% of Americans saying let Roe v. Wade stand. Only 21% saying overturn it. Again, in the same poll where roughly half of Americans consider themselves to be pro-life. So isn't there the belief, isn't there the feeling that Justice Roberts is more of an incrementalist? And this is my prediction. I could be wrong, but doesn't it seem, if we're looking at the precedent, at least how this court handles cases like this, that they'll let the lower court overturn this Alabama law, and then they'll just deny cert and refuse to hear it, like they do with all the gun laws?
That is possible. You may see the Supreme Court say, we don't want to deal with this. The lower court decided it right. Because as it stands now, this law is facially inconsistent with constitutional case law. So it's very likely a district court, a lower court, is going to say, this doesn't fly. Here's an injunction. We're stopping this now. And it's possible the Supreme Court may decline to hear it. The principle of stare decisis is the idea that let the previous case stand. But justices like Alito have suggested when constitutionality is at stake, then we're more likely to take a fresh look at a case. So if this case makes it to the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade is in jeopardy.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.